here is the paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine.
Und ich bin nun mit meiner Regierung 2 volle Tage gesessen, habe gewartet, seit...
I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
What General Weygand has called the Battle of France is over. The Battle of Britain is about to begin. Monstrous product of former wrongs and shame has now resolved to try to break our famous island race by a process of indiscriminate slaughter and destruction.
What might happen there is no knowing, but we wouldn't be our little wooden dance for you.
For the people of the besieged island of Britain, the closing months of 1940 are the hardest they have yet had to bear. There is no longer the immediate threat of invasion. The German Air Force has failed to gain daylight mastery of the skies over Britain. But now, cities and towns all over the country are to be the targets of a campaign of terror. The people of Britain are to be bombed into submission. By the end of 1940, the Blitz has killed 40,000 civilians and seriously wounded 50,000 more. 2 million are homeless. But there is no mass panic, no descent into anarchy and despair. Only 2 years earlier, the government had predicted that the mass bombing of cities would drive millions of people to the point of acute mental breakdown. In fact, shared suffering has created a new climate of comradeship, fortitude, and determination. An American radio correspondent, witnessing the extraordinary resilience of the capital's citizens, sends home the message that London can take it. But not only Londoners will be tested to the limits of endurance. The people of Coventry, Birmingham, Southampton, Bristol, Plymouth, Glasgow, Belfast and Liverpool will all show that they too can take it. There is one ray of hope in the closing weeks of 1940. In North Africa, an Italian army over 250,000 strong is suffering a series of humiliating defeats at the hands of a British and Commonwealth force of only 36,000 men. Between the 9th of December and 7th of February, 130,000 Italian prisoners have been taken for only 550 British losses. The way is now open for the total defeat of the Italians in North Africa. But suddenly, on February the 9th, 1941, the British offensive is halted. Churchill has ordered the bulk of the army to Greece, where the Germans are expected to intervene on behalf of their Italian allies. 3 days after Churchill's fateful decision, units of the German army set sail for North Africa. The Africa Corps consists of only 2 divisions. The men have had no training in desert warfare. Much of their equipment has not yet been adapted to cope with the heat and the dust. But the Africa Corps has one asset of inestimable value. Its commander is Erwin Rommel. Rommel's reputation is high. In the battle for France, he led the 7th Panzer Division. Now his first act in North Africa is to disobey the orders of his superiors. As yet, Rommel has few tanks. His instructions are to wait until the rest of his forces arrive at the end of May. Instead, he rushes his units straight to the front. There, they're ordered to raise clouds of dust, as if moving in great numbers. The move works. Finding that the British did not attack him, he decides to strike first. The effect of Rommel's audacity is almost magical. The British, believing they're about to be encircled, fall back in confusion. By April, the British army is in headlong retreat. Thousands of British soldiers now face years of captivity in Axis prisoner of war camps. In Britain, news of the North African disaster will cause widespread dismay. In the battle for France, in Norway, and now in Libya, wherever the British army has encountered the Germans, it has suffered costly and demoralizing defeat. Within weeks, Greece and Crete will be added to the lengthening list of British disasters. By mid-May 1941, The Blitz on British cities has finally come to an end, but a more insidious and in many ways more difficult trial is about to begin. Where the bombers of the Luftwaffe have failed, the U-boat may yet succeed. Britain is in imminent danger of being starved into submission. The Lend-Lease agreement between Britain and the United States means that immediate cash payment for American food, armaments and raw materials is no longer demanded, but the ships which carry them may still run the gauntlet of the Atlantic U-boats.
Give me your answer too. I'm half crazy, waiting for news from you. Britannia won't have a carriage for the Anglo-American marriage if you don't lend on the lease and lend a shipload of dollars.
By now, 3 merchant ships are being sent to the bottom of the Atlantic every day. The effect on British daily life is soon felt. Everywhere, conversation turns to food and how to get it. From January 1940, bacon, ham, butter, sugar and meat are all rationed. Tea, margarine, cooking fats and cheese are soon added to the list. As food supplies dwindle, civilian morale becomes a major preoccupation of the government. What is desperately needed is a tangible military success. The initiative must be regained in North Africa. The port of Tobruk is now the only British foothold in Libya. Rommel has already twice failed to capture the garrison. In the first action, Rommel loses 16 tanks out of 38. An Australian counterattack captures over 1,000 Italian prisoners. In the second assault, British artillery and minefields account for half of 70 attacking tanks. Encouraged by these successes, a plan is devised for the relief of Tobruk. June the 14th is the beginning of a major British counter-offensive. It is doomed to failure. Rommel has only 12 new 88mm anti-tank guns, but they wreak a terrible destruction. The last radio message from the commander of one formation is the cry, "They are tearing my tanks to bits." In 3 days of battle, the British lose 1,000 men, or almost half of their 200 tanks. There seems little that Britain can do to prevent Rommel sweeping from Libya into Egypt. But in June 1941, the ambitions of Hitler and his generals lie elsewhere.
At 4 o'clock this morning, Hitler attacked and invaded Russia. This was no surprise to me. In fact, I gave clear and precise warning to Stalin of what was coming. I gave him warnings as I have given warnings to others before. Hitler is a monster of wickedness, insatiable in his lust for blood and plunder. So now this bloodthirsty gutter snipe must launch his mechanized armies upon new fields of slaughter, pillage, and devastation.
June the 22nd, 1941. 3 million German troops with over 3,000 tanks surge across the frontiers of the Soviet Union. It is blitzkrieg on a gigantic scale. For Adolf Hitler, the conquest of the Soviet Union is a long-cherished ambition. It is to be an ideological and racial war, a war without mercy. For the Red Army, the early battles are a series of disasters. Stalin's repeated purges of army officers have cost the Soviet Union a wealth of experience. So confident is Hitler of the weakness of the Soviet Union that his invading armies have material reserves for only 1 month's fighting. He has already ordered a 40% cut in German munitions production. For 12 days after the invasion, Stalin is silent. On July the 3rd, he at last broadcasts to the Soviet people. Guerrilla warfare is to be waged behind the German lines. In front, everything that can conceivably be of use to the enemy is to be destroyed. As Red Army units fight, often to the last man, behind them entire factories are dismantled and shipped to the east. Stalin knows that this war will be won or lost by industrial as well as military power. Britain has reached precisely the same conclusion. The British Minister of Labour is Ernest Bevin. His official powers exceed those of every other member of the government, including Winston Churchill. Anyone between the ages of 14 and 65 can be directed to do any job. They could be sent to any part of the country, and their pay and conditions of work would be determined by the ministry. It is Bevin who decides that in the drive for production, a major part must be played by women. In late 1941, the government introduces the most controversial measure of the war. Single women between the ages of 19 and 30 must work in industry, the women's services, or civil defense. By 1943, there will be 7.5 million women in paid employment, 500,000 in engineering. Initial resistance soon turns to active enthusiasm. Equal pay is still a rarity, but for thousands of British women, war work means financial independence and new opportunities. Revolutionary change is not confined to factories. By 1941, 20,000 women, 1/3 of them from cities, are working on the land. It is arduous and exhausting work, but by no means the least popular choice. The services have the most difficulty in the recruitment of women. From husbands and fathers, there is overwhelming opposition. The response of the government is to compel all single women of 21 and over to join. Although the majority of those in the women's branches of the services are assigned to domestic and administrative work, many do break new ground. They become drivers, mechanics, radar operators, and crew anti-aircraft batteries. It soon becomes clear that women are often better than men at handling delicate equipment under stress. Over half the barrage balloon sites in the country will be run by women. Women pilots, although barred from combat, ferry aircraft from factories to airfields. Already war is changing the aspirations of British women out of all recognition. By the autumn of 1941, German armoured columns have penetrated deep into the Russian heartland. Close behind follows the infantry, fighting and advancing over 20 miles a day.
Soll ich dir, mein Liebchen, nennen, Rosa heißt das schöne Kind. Willst du sie noch näher kennen?
Already over 40 Soviet divisions have been utterly destroyed. Kiev has been encircled and over 500,000 men taken prisoner. At Vyazma and Vyansk, another 600,000 are captured. With every day that passes, the mystique of the German army grows. Its officers and men ride high on a wave of confidence.
Ich sie so gerne zu so später Abendstund.
On October the 2nd, Hitler gives the order for what is intended to be the final blow for the Soviet Union, the capture of Moscow itself. In the capital, there is near panic. Most of the staff of foreign embassies are fleeing to cities further east. But the German advance is already slowing dangerously. With the coming of the October rains, the German armies find themselves facing a sea of mud. Seemingly overnight, the rapid advance is turning into a tortuous crawl. Germany's already colossal expenditure of war material on the Eastern Front is placing a heavy strain on her industrial capacity. The economy has not yet been placed on a full-scale war footing. In Britain, military planners are convinced that German industry and morale can be broken by the power of the bomber. In spite of the Luftwaffe's failure to bomb a civilian population into submission in the Blitz of 1940 and 41, the faith of Bomber Command is unshakable.
Hello, Skipper. Hello, Navigator. Half a minute to go. Okay, thanks very much.
Keep weaving, Tim. There's quite a lot of nice stuff coming up as well, falling off a bit low.
Hello, engineer. Skipper here. Yeah? Will you put the revs up, please? Yeah?
Okay, keep weaving.
Hello, Bombardier. Okay when you are.
Bomb doors open.
Bomb doors open, Bombardier.
Right. Bomb's going in a minute. Bomb.
Hey, Jimmy, tracer behind us.
Bomb, gentlemen.
Hurry up, Jimmy. Hold it up. Where is he, rear gunner? Can you see him? Down! 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 He's shot down! He's shot down! Did you shoot him down? Yeah, he's got him, boy. Right in the middle. Bloody good. Bloody good.
Keep weaving. There's some black coming at me.
Okay, don't shout all at once.
Right. Photograph taken.
Okay, photograph taken.
Even in the height of the Blitz, the British people were not wholeheartedly committed to the bombing of German cities. Nearly 40% disapproved on moral grounds. Enthusiasm for revenge was greatest in those very areas which themselves experienced little bombing. But whatever the opinions of the British people, by 1941 the pattern is established. Civilian populations are to be considered legitimate targets. Cologne will be obliterated. The destruction of Dresden will kill more civilians than all the raids on Britain taken together. But on the scale of human misery, nothing in the West will compare with the fate of the Soviet people. Mid-November 1941, and the weather at last favors the German armies facing Moscow. What the infantry have called General Mud has been defeated by frost. All along the Eastern Front, the tide of German successes seems unstoppable. Once more, Hitler sets his eyes on Moscow itself, now only a tantalizing 40 miles distant. On November the 15th, the great offensive begins. It has already begun to snow. In Russia's long history, winter has always been Moscow's first line of defense. The winter of 1941 is no exception. As the cold deepens, counterattacks of increasing ferocity wear down German units whose morale is already close to breaking point. In temperatures down to 40 degrees below, divisions shrink to regiments, regiments are reduced to battalions. With German forward units already in the Moscow suburbs and the bulk of the German armies only 27 miles from the Kremlin, the offensive is finally abandoned. Marshal Doskov, the Soviet commander in charge of the defense of Moscow, has been waiting for just this moment. The Red Army's massive counteroffensive will continue for 3 more months. seemingly endless divisions of fresh Siberian troops will force the battered German armies back 150 miles. Now Hitler's generals begin to fear that east of Moscow there is another Soviet Union, a vast tract, the scale of whose resources they have scarcely begun to imagine. The war in the East will not be the swift campaign of conquest that Hitler had planned. It will prove a protracted and costly struggle, for which Germany is totally unprepared. And already events thousands of miles distant are changing the entire course of Germany's future.
Here is the news. Japan's long-threatened aggression in the Far East began tonight with air attacks on United States naval bases in the Pacific. Fresh reports are coming in every minute. The latest facts of the situation are these.
In this nation's capital, the Japanese attack on Hawaii and the Philippine Islands, and the torpedo assault on 2 American cargo ships in the Pacific have come with an electrifying shock. There are crowds right now gathered in front of the White House and the State Department and the Japanese embassy.
No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
This is the BBC Home and Forces program. Here's the news. This is Wilfred Pickles reading it. This morning's news of Japan's aggression is of successful countermeasures against the invasion of Malaya. There have also been reports of enemy attacks on Thailand and Hong Kong. At Shanghai, the Japanese have taken over the international waterfront and sunk the British gunboat Petrel. President Roosevelt has spoken of serious damage and casualties in the earlier Japanese airways on American...
After the outrages they have committed upon us at Pearl Harbor, in the Pacific Islands, in the Philippines, in Malaya and the Dutch East Indies, they must now know that the stakes for which they have decided to play are mortal. When we look at the resources of the United States and the British Empire compared to those of Japan, when we remember those of China, which have so long valiantly withstood invasion and tyranny, and when also we observe the Russian menace which hangs over Japan, it becomes still more difficult to reconcile Japanese action with prudence or even with sanity. What kind of a people do they think we are? Is it possible they do not realize that we shall never cease to persevere against them until they have been taught a lesson which they and the world will never forget?
As news of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor reaches Britain, there is widespread relief. Winston Churchill will later admit that that night he went to bed saturated with emotion and slept the sleep of the saved. Three days after Pearl Harbor, Germany and Italy side with Japan, declaring war on the United States. Now America's vast industrial and human potential is to be converted to the making of war. By June 1942, the German armies on the Eastern Front have once more gathered their strength. This time their objective is not Moscow, but the oil fields of the Caucasus. The first stage is to be the destruction of a vast fortress, the Crimean city of Sebastopol. Sebastopol is riddled with tunnels and bunkers. Whole factories have been sited underground. The city is defended by 106,000 men and ringed with trenches, underground strongholds, and armored gun emplacements. It is the fate of Sebastopol to face the greatest German artillery concentration of the entire war. German commanders believe this battle to be of such importance, they mass 208 batteries of artillery along a 22-mile front. One heavy mortar alone fires shells weighing 2 tons. Facing Sebastopol, the Germans deploy one of the largest guns ever built. It is an 800mm rail gun with a barrel 90 feet long. It fires 7-ton shells, a distance of over 30 miles. For 27 days, Sebastopol is bombarded without remission. One by one, the giant strongholds are blasted into oblivion. Even so, it takes weeks of house-to-house fighting before Sebastopol is finally overcome. In the battle for the city, 24,000 Germans are killed. No one can even estimate the number of Soviet dead, but includes many thousands of civilians. The immediate result of the capture of Sebastopol is a surge in German confidence. Hitler now believes that victory within the Soviet Union may still be within his grasp. What is more, the news from North Africa is of yet further sweeping German successes.
Ein Tiroler wollte jagen, einen Gänsbock, Silbergrau.
In July 1942, Rommel has captured Tobruk and driven the 8th Army to defensive positions at El Alamein. Rommel's Afrika Korps and its Italian allies are now only 60 miles from Alexandria. For the British, the situation seems hopeless. Embassy officials in Cairo are already burning documents and preparing to leave. But the tide is about to turn in North Africa. American supplies and equipment have begun to arrive in enormous quantities. Equally important, the demoralized 8th Army has a new commander, General Bernard Montgomery.
Here we will stand and fight. There will be no further withdrawal. I have ordered that all plans and instructions dealing with further withdrawal are to be burnt. And at once. We will stand and fight here. We can't stay here alive. Then let us stay here dead. I want to impress on everyone that the bad times are over. They are finished. Our mandate from the Prime Minister is to destroy the Axis forces in North Africa. I have seen it, written on half a sheet of notepaper. It can be done, and it will be done, beyond any possibility of doubt.
BBC Home and Forces program. This is Bruce Belfridge. Here's some excellent news which has come during the past hour in the form of a communique from GHQ Cairo. It says, the Axis forces in the Western Desert, after 12 days and nights of ceaseless attacks by our land and air forces, are now in full retreat. It's known that the enemy's losses in killed and wounded have been exceptionally high. Up to date, we've destroyed more than 260 German and Italian tanks and captured or destroyed at least 270 guns.
The British victory at El Alamein in the autumn of 1942 is the beginning of the end of the German presence in North Africa. It is the victory for which everyone in Britain has been praying. Within months of Montgomery's triumph comes even more startling news. Germany has suffered a colossal defeat at the hands of the Red Army. In August 1942, the German 6th Army, under General von Paulus, has launched a major assault on the city of Stalingrad. Quickly, a spearhead force has penetrated to the northern suburbs. In the minds of the British people, memories of the terror of the Blitz are still fresh. When news arrives that the city has been bombed, there is deep sympathy. It is the most horrifying air raid the war has yet seen. In one night, 40,000 civilians are killed, and it is only the beginning. The battle for the city rages first, street by street, then ruin by ruin. But the German forces are being encircled in a gigantic death trap. By the onset of winter, the 6th Army is starving and demoralized. Hitler has refused to allow withdrawal. Soon, over 300,000 German soldiers are trapped in the rubble of the city.
the Battle of Stalingrad, with the capture of 8 more German generals and 45,000 other prisoners in the past 2 days, has overshadowed the rest of the news from Russia. But our allies have kept up their great advance on the southern front. The programs of the German radio were interrupted this afternoon to broadcast the special communique. It was followed by sustained funeral drum rolls and by slow music, then by the national anthem and a 3-minute silence. A little later, it was announced that Goebbels had ordered all places of entertainment to be closed for 3 days. When this announcement was broadcast, it was followed by more slow music. It has also been announced that the whole public life of Germany for these 3 days will be given over to mourning. All radio programs are being changed.
By 1943, the commitment of the United States to the war in Europe has been brought home to the people of Britain in the most direct way possible. Almost 1 million GIs and airmen are on British soil. British opinion on the subject of American servicemen is sharply divided. Some are impressed by their friendliness. Others complain they are brash and boastful. Most British servicemen are heartily anti-American. In their eyes, the Americans' combination of wealth and Hollywood-style glamour is an intolerable provocation. To the battle-weary British, civilians and servicemen alike, the Americans seem to be contributing little and suffering hardly at all. But soon animosity will turn to respect. By July 1943, American and British forces fighting together have driven the Germans from Sicily.
Today, the 3rd of September, we enter the 5th year of the war. And today, the 8th Army, having fought its way from Egypt to Tunisia and then crossed the seas to Sicily, has landed on the mainland of the continent of Europe. We have a good plan and air support on a greater scale than we have ever had before. There can only be one end to this next battle, and that is another success. Forward to victory. Let us knock Italy out of the war.
In the first few days, both British and American invading forces break out of their beachheads and successfully push inland. But the Germans are quick to regroup. Only Allied naval gunfire prevents counterattacks breaking through to the vulnerable beachheads.
governo italiano, riconosciuta la impossibilità di continuare la...
Within 6 days of the invasion, the Italian government requests an amnesty. Now the Italian army is divided. Some units are fighting for the Allies and some against. On September the 12th, Mussolini, a prisoner of the government, is rescued in a daring raid by German commandos and flown to an audience with Hitler. Soon he is once more proclaiming himself leader of Italy. Italian troops who resist their former allies suffer heavy casualties. Hundreds are captured to be shot or deported. Then on September the 27th, the people of Naples rebel against the Germans, fighting for 3 days and suffering heavy losses. The battle ends only as the Allied armies approach the city.
And this is Frederick Grisewood reading. 2 hours ago, Italy declared war on Germany. A proclamation by Marshal Badoglio brands the Germans for savagery against the civil population and says there can be no peace while a single German remains on Italian soil. Italy's new step has been acknowledged in London, Washington, and Moscow. That status will be that of a co-belligerent, not an ally. The terms of the armistice with the Allied command remain in full force.
As 1943 turns to 1944, it is clear that the battle for Italy will be won. Now everyone in Britain knows that an Allied invasion of France must come soon. The only question is when.